Hello and good morning, everyone. Only positivity here. I have my coffee with me, ready to explore this new phase of life with you all. So, over the past few years, I have gained a whole new perspective on life, and I've realized that life is too short to not be enjoying yourself while doing great things. So, come along with me as I explore this new lens through fitness, photography, reading, traveling, cannabis, and much more. Looking forward to the journey, guys, and remember, only positivity.
Do it. All right, my friend, and we are live. I'm here with Bryan Peterson. How are we doing this afternoon, my friend?
Doing just great. Thank you so much for the invitation and looking forward to having a discourse on the subject of photography.
Yes, yes, I'm very, very much excited for this. And I hear you're in the Chicagoland area this week.
I'm
Oh,
back now in Austin, Texas area where I reside. So
okay, all right. Maybe next time you're around, maybe we can even link up in person, grab coffee or something like that. I'd be happy
sounds
to
good.
get to know you a
Sounds
little
good.
bit better that way. What was the purpose of your visit out in Chicago?
I was doing my usual annual 2-day workshop in Chicago. Usually July and August find me on the road in the United States
Okay.
where I do my street photography workshops, including Chicago. Next stop this weekend is Seattle, and after Seattle, I'm off to New York. And then once I'm done in New York, I'm up to Alaska to shift gears and do the nature bear photography workshop. So yeah,
My goodness, that is awesome. Seems like you've got a great tour coming up. And judging by some of your Instagram posts there, it seems like you are well traveled, my friend, to say the least.
I am indeed about 300 days a year on the road. So
Wow, that
yeah.
is amazing. And then you're back in Austin for a couple of months throughout the year?
No, no, it's never a month. It's more like a couple days here. And yeah,
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I thought we could just jump right in. So, like I've been doing the deep dive on your Instagram and whatnot. But I feel like one thing that's good for me to hear is, let's say you and I like ran into each other on the street or at a coffee shop and we started chatting. How would you introduce yourself to me with everything that you got going on?
well, it depends. If I'm assuming I would introduce myself to you on the subject of photography, I don't know
Yeah.
whatever reason I would have for introducing myself otherwise, but
Right.
it's a pretty common thing that happens where people either come into a workshop because they know of me from a referral, which doesn't happen often, but it happens still. But most people come to our workshops are familiar with who I am because of my books, first and foremost. Occasionally, I'll get people coming into a workshop who've seen me on Instagram and then start doing their own research and discover, oh my God, that's the guy whose books I already own,
Okay.
or that's a guy whose books I should probably get, that kind of thing. So I would say to you, if I see in a coffee shop along the lines of you saw me and you said, "Oh, are you a photographer?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'm a photographer." Oh, really? What do you do? I'd say, "Well, I teach workshops around the world, or I write books, or I have a photography school online." Any number of those answers might come out of my mouth. It all depends on what I think you may want to be interested in hearing. So,
No, I totally hear you. And I was,
yeah.
mostly interested, oftentimes, right? I could tell you, hey, my name's Amar Pandya. I work as a product manager at a local university or what have you, right? I could say that, but I'm always interested to hear what people like truly define themselves as. When you meet them, are they
Well, it
really
looks to me by the background there, you're a musician as well.
Yeah, I dabble with so that's my professional podcast equipment. When people come over, I got a little bit of guitar action going on there. Yeah, I've been recently dabbling. I grew up playing orchestral instruments, like the cello and the viola and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and really wasn't too interested in pursuing that any further in the classical sense. But now I'm really more into the free form YouTube learning, trying to just kind of play around with the stuff, and that's
Yeah.
been a very good way to spark my curiosity, man.
Yeah.
But so another thing I like to do with folks is kind of go back to the start of it all, right? So if you don't mind sharing, Bryan, where were you born? Where are you originally from?
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest,
Okay.
and up until the age of about 19, I was a troubled student of of conventional education. Troubled meaning that I just went to school more for the social life than anything else. And graduated, fortunately, was able to graduate with a GPA of 1.8. So,
Well done.
but ironically now, of course, here I am, writing books. But nonetheless, um, in that time frame, I had since probably the age of 10 recognized that I had a natural skill of drawing, painting, pen and inks, pastels, charcoals, things like that. So all my attention was going into that. And quite honestly, I was through high school convinced that I was going to be a Playboy cartoonist. That was my goal.
Okay.
And I was pretty good at delivering punchlines and coming up with these little, one-liners. And I thought, okay, put that with my drawings. And I got kicked out of class a few times for some of my X-rated drawings. But
Okay.
nonetheless, I got out of high school, and my oldest brother, who was away at college, he went on to become a very famous international research scientist in the field of oceanography.
Wow.
He turned me on to photography at the age of 19. He said, you ought to consider photography as part of your art skills as well. And I said, well, that's not even art. And he said, well, no, I think it is, and he was an
Yeah.
amateur. So he had just come back from being at the University of Hawaii for almost 5 years, where he was going to school. And he turned me on and gave me his Nikon Photomic F. The year was 1970, and proceeded to encourage me to go out and shoot some film, which I did. And I absolutely fell in love with the process, the instantaneousness of creating images in camera.
Yeah.
And along with that came, for me personally, a visual awareness of compositional principles. And I discovered that even the viewfinder, in effect, became my canvas. And within a matter of days, literally days, I put down all pen and inks and pastels, and replaced them all with an index finger on a shutter release.
Nice.
And I ended up doing that, with a passion that one would probably expect from the standpoint of, as you look at my career. In other words, there was never going to be anything but
Right.
photography now. And I've often said this to countless people over the years, whether I'm doing a lecture to groups of several thousand or just a one-on-one, that passion for anything is really, in my mind, an unstoppable and unbeatable force that will get you the success that you desire. But I will stress at the same time, there's a price you'll pay for that.
Yep.
Like most things, and that price may be something as small and minimal as you've never heard of Game of Thrones. Why is that? Well, I've been passionate about my photography, and I haven't turned on the TV in 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow, boy, you missed out on a great show. And it's like, well, maybe so, but I'm also quite successful at this, and I love what I do.
Yes.
My point being is that my passion today certainly didn't cause me to miss the Game of Thrones, but I was not a regular viewer of it.
Right.
So in other words, when I would have some time free, I would do the binging of shows like that. But for the most part, it's just one example of what I'm talking about, a commitment and what passion does. It really creates an internal commitment for some. Some people, they talk about how they're passionate about something, and I go, what are you passionate about? And then when they tell me, I go, so how often do you go out and shoot? And they go, I try to get out at least once or twice a month. And I'm thinking, you're not passionate. And they go, oh, no, I am. When I'm out there, I'm really passionate. I said, well, that's not what I'm saying. You can be passionate in the process, but are you passionate when you're not doing it?
Yes.
And to me, that applies to just any endeavor that you want to do in life. I don't care what it is. So
Right. Right. And that is all gold. That is all gold. And I'm hoping to unpack that with you because yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking to hear. So as we go to the primary part of what you said, where you were talking about how, school just wasn't it for you, right? And not to bring it back to myself, I felt that way as well. But how did that impact your, let's say, your emotional presence, or what was it that really was tugging you away from school? Why was it not for you? And one thing, a comment I'll say about that is, I think that the traditional schooling system and the way you get tested is really not a good attestation to anyone's knowledge base, right? They don't teach you things like photography when you're growing up. They don't teach you those type of skills. Any basic financial stuff they don't teach you in school. It's all algebra, arithmetic, and those type of things,
Sure.
which for a person like you seems to not resonate. So coming back to my question is, how did that impact your upbringing? Saying that, hey, I'm not good at school, but everyone else around me is kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, but I'm resisting, and I know it's right for me. Take me a little bit through that.
Well, I wouldn't say I resisted school as much
Okay.
as I simply wasn't a good student. My attendance record was perfect. Again, I enjoyed the social aspect of it.
Okay.
You know, I was there rooting on the football team and things like that. I even played JV basketball
Nice.
in high school. But for the most part, I just was not somebody who had I think looking back on it, it's possible I may have suffered from some ADD. Back then, it wasn't something people diagnosed. I'm not even sure I have ADD, but I know that my attention span was very, very limited.
Okay.
I could be told one thing, and then 5 minutes later, I've moved on to something else and forgot what I was just told.
Okay.
But it wasn't for lack of interest. I mean, I took away with that. Believe it or not, I came out of high school speaking German.
Oh, nice.
If not for my German class, I probably wouldn't have got a 1.8, but I was fascinated by language. So I got A's in German, but I got F's or D's in damn near everything else,
I hear you.
except for world history. That's another one of my favorite subjects. So
Yeah.
history and language. And now it's not for any other reason than I lived in France, but I was able to learn French while I lived in France for 10 years. I just came back from Frankfurt. I was over there for a few weeks. And it's always good to go back. And I mean, not to go back, but when I'm back in that area, to call upon my language skills. So, and that's fun. My daughters are fluent in 4 languages.
Wow.
It impacted them because of where we've lived over the years. They're, of course, grown up and they're on their own now. One's living in Paris. One's, as I mentioned when we talked earlier, living in Chicago.
Okay.
Um, but more to your point, which school was I enjoyed it, but I just wasn't a person who was pursuing that. I wanted to be an artist, and I just had reason to believe I could,
Yeah.
because I was also actually selling my work back in high school,
Okay.
not to students, but I mean to real honest to goodness people who appreciated what I was doing, adults that were working regular jobs. I had work that was being sold into offices and work that being sold into homes. Um, so I had every reason to believe that, I had a career doing that.
Very
And at
good.
the same time, if not for my brother introducing me to photography, I don't know if I'd be painting today or what I'd be doing.
I hear
I'm
you.
assuming I'd be doing something artistic, but would I have enjoyed the success I've enjoyed? I have no idea. And it's getting back to or moving, jumping ahead. I went this route until around 1985, 83. My apologies. So 13 years later, I'm a full-on commercial photographer,
Okay.
doing mostly magazine work, working for the likes of national magazines like Wilderness Society, National Audubon Society.
Wow.
By God, I was going to go out and change the world and save the earth. And around that time, two major trends or events took place that have impacted my life to this day. I had one student who worked in Portland, Oregon at the Dillingham company, which was a gigantic dry dock ship repair facility in
Mhm.
Portland, Oregon. These guys would bring in these oil tankers and other ships, and they would do these dry dock renovations. So this guy told me, he said, "Look, you got a really good eye, and I love your nature stuff. But as a student of yours," his name was Ray, "I'm going to put a blindfold on you and drive you to a place because I'm determined myself to want to photograph great shots of this area, but I don't want you to see any of it until we arrive." And I thought, what the hell is this about? So next thing I know, we took up my blindfold and I'm in a dry dock area. I couldn't have been more turned off. I said, "This is gross," because I'm a nature guy, right?
Yeah. Right.
He said, "No, Brian, it's really not. I think there's a lot of beauty here. And if nothing else, just help me see it." And I thought, oh God. And he paid me, quite well for what I was asked to do. So I reluctantly said, "All right, let's go." And I swear to you, before the day was over, much like when my brother turned me on to photography, I came out of there thinking, "My God, this is fantastic. This is incredible. This is all the principles of composition and exposure, but now applying it to what I call the blue collar industry." And
Yeah.
next thing you know, from 83 till about 89, without going into further a whole lot of detail, I
Mhm.
became this blue collar commercial photographer. And I had a big ad campaign that I would promote my work. And I had produced this 16-page promotional piece of all these portraits of workers and the environment that they worked in, whether it's gas, oil, electric, hydro, silver mine, gold mining, didn't matter, shipyards.
Yeah.
It was called Hard Hats with Soft Hearts. And oh
Nice.
man, people love this. Oh, this guy, he does blue collar, because most people were doing white collar stuff, Fortune 500 companies.
Mhm.
Not that blue collar industries are not Fortune 500s, but they were doing the Wall Street stuff. They were doing the suits and the tie people, or fashion. I got out of the magazine work because the pay was, I getting sick and tired of getting paid $350 a day plus expenses, which seems like a lot, but by God, you get into corporate, now you're at 1,500 a day plus expenses.
Okay.
And so I did that all the way to 89. In that period, 1983 to be exact, and up till that point as well, on the side, I was doing photography workshops out in the Pacific Northwest, advertising my works by putting on these counter displays that I would have a printer make for me with little pockets of information and setting them in the camera stores. And in 1983, I decided to take that carousel of slides, which were how to, before and after. This
Yeah.
is the scene. This is what we do with it. This is the scene. This is what we do with it. I went to New York on it just on a fluke. I said, I'm going to see if Pop Photo Magazine would be interested in this.
Okay.
So, make a long story short, they signed me to a contract for 3 years after I showed them what I was doing, and they couldn't get enough of it. Every month I had an article in Pop Photo, 2 pages to 6 pages.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden I'm Bryan Peterson, the how-to guy. And in 1989, or 88, I should say, through a contact at Pop Photo, he suggested I go see Marissa Bolzone, who was at that point an editor at Watson Guptill.
Okay.
It was a big photo publishing house. And I went over and said, hello, I'm Bryan Peterson. These are all my tear sheets from my articles at Pop Photo. Steve Pollock who's the feature editor, thought you might be interested. And what he thinks is, oh my God, this is great. We should do a book. And thus became the birthplace of Learning to See Creatively. The first book I did on the national stage. And then 2 years later, a fascinating story in that I went back with the idea to Watson Guptill, and I said, hey, I got another book idea called Understanding Exposure. Marissa had moved on. She was no longer there, but the woman that took her place laughed at the manuscript. She said, this is a joke. I mean, this is so Sesame Street. It's an assault to the photography community.
Yeah.
The way you talk about exposure, I mean, this is stupid. And I said, oh, okay, because it does really well when I do a presentation. He says, well, it's not right for us. And I said, okay. And I was kind of offended by her, I guess, directness. But it is what it is. So I said, okay, fine. So just on a whim, I sent the proposal off to Kodak in Rochester, New York,
Okay.
who had just came out with Joy of Photography. And about 3 months went by, and my phone rings at 10 in the morning, and it's Kodak. And they said, hey, we have been sitting on this. We've just had a meeting. We love this idea. This is incredible. We want to do a book. We're sending out a contract. I went, holy shit, Kodak of all people. Wow.
Yeah.
Boom. So overnighting to me is a FedEx envelope with a contract. I kid you not, within an hour of that phone call, I get a call back from Marissa Bolzone.
Okay.
And she says, Bryan, it's Marissa. I said, hey, how are you? Because I heard you went to Egypt to study archaeology. She said, yeah, I'm back. Didn't work out. But listen, I was going through the file cabinet and I see that Linda rejected your manuscript on Understanding Exposure, which is gross. It's absurd. That's why we probably got rid of her. But we want to do this book.
Okay.
I said, holy shit, come on. I just literally got off the phone with Kodak. This is weird. And she says, no, don't let Kodak do that book because they're going to produce a bazillion copies. And a year later, it'll be on the remainder shelf. And that's it. Bryan, this has got legs. This is a book that you can continually doing revisions on. It'll be around for years. And I went, really? So I said no to Kodak and stayed with Watson Guptill, who eventually got purchased by Penguin Random House. So fast forward to 2022. And as you may or may not know, Understanding Exposure is on its 4th revised edition in 11 languages and currently still selling. And now we have reached over 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, we crossed over the $1 million. I'm not $1 million. Well, of course, $1 million, but we crossed over the 1 million sales mark.
Wow.
So that book has sold over 1 million copies around the world. And interestingly enough, I just had a conversation with one of the people at Random House. I said, there's 2 questions I have. Why have we never produced this book in Hindi or in Farsi? Because those are 2 of my biggest audiences. And they went back and said, we'll get back with you. That's a very good question. And they're going to talk to the people at the international, who is in charge of the international something or other. So maybe that's going to happen. I have no idea, but
I hope it does.
yeah, because it's a huge market, and maybe it has everything to do with economics. I really don't have the answer to that. But since that time, 14 additional books have been published, and it's been a good run, needless to say.
Wow. Wow. Congratulations, my friend. That is such a great success story. I thank you so much for sharing that
The
information.
new one, by the way, just came out June 21st, which is Understanding Street Photography.
I'm gonna go ahead and jot these down. So we got understanding street,
Exposure.
understanding exposure.
Yeah, that's in its 4th edition. I mean,
Okay.
that's been the people often call it the Bible of photography, which is I'm
Wow.
not sure. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with it, but at the same time, I can't argue with the sales.
It's a good title to
Everybody
have.
I've met, I mean, I've heard it over and over. They said, that book is the only book that's ever made it so clear and concise, and the way you did it and the photos used to illustrate it and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And ironically, as you may know, exposure, requires some degree of mathematics relative to ISO and the relationship with f-stop and shutter speed. And the one thing I should mention, which I don't know if the word humble is the right word to use, but up till that book was produced, there was never a mention made historically in any photo book, as far as how to or understanding photography, of this thing called the photographic triangle. And yet that's the way I taught back in the late 70s and early 80s before these book contracts came up. And so understanding exposure introduced the relationship between ISO and its impact on aperture and shutter speed choices.
Okay.
Now they're all intertwined. And nowadays, if you just Google the photographic triangle, there must be 100 references to let me show you how to use the photographic triangle. So to me, it's a unknown legacy, if nothing else. But it's cool to know that that I was able to introduce that.
Yeah.
And now to see how it has helped so many people, even outside of understanding exposure. Even if you don't have understanding exposure, there's been countless photo books written on the subject of exposure. And everybody's employing this photographic triangle idea, which makes me really happy. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I'm sure you will, but I hope you go down as one of like the foundational fathers of photography, right? Like it seems that you have revolutionized things,
I can't be the father for obvious reasons because it's
One of them,
for
Bryan.
me. Well, I'm glad. I'm fully aware that I've made a certainly a small contribution to the photography community, and that makes me feel really good for obvious reasons.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I love it. Now, if we peel that back a little bit more, going back to your upbringing in the Pacific Northwest, now I'm assuming that had to play a large role in your ability just to get out, use your brother's camera, and get some good angles because just of the landscape out there. Did that spark? Was that an initial seed planted for your long-term career in photography, or did you get out of the Pacific Northwest and start exploring?
No, I stayed for quite some time,
Okay.
and it was certainly where the environment out there in the Pacific Northwest is such that you can't imagine doing anything but nature.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it was an incredibly crowded field. And if not for Ray taking me down to the shipyards, I probably would still be suffering today because there's people way back then who are still involved in the business today on a much smaller scale, but I still see them popping up and they're still shooting their nature stuff. Except they've moved from the Pacific Northwest. They've moved to the Lofton Islands in Norway. They've moved to Iceland to do the night shots and stuff. Technology has allowed us, as you well know, to shoot Milky Ways and star trails now, unlike the days before. We could shoot star trails, but shooting Milky Way and things like that was out of the question. But nowadays, that's very possible. So, but yeah, that had an impact. And as I mentioned, I've said this before, bloom where you're planted is something I've told people all the time.
That's awesome.
So if you are living in New York City, not surprising, the likes of people who I grew up in just idolizing, people like Jay Maisel, Eric Miola, Pete Turner, Mitchell Funk. These were all guys working out in New York City, and not surprising, the work they were producing was what we recognize today as street photography.
Mhm.
And yet, because I was not only living in the Pacific Northwest, where it's rare do you find a street that would be worthy of street photography outside the city of Portland, you end up finding what I call what the road passes by, which are often these gravel roads and out in the countryside. And what they pass by are these ditches of incredible, beautiful wildflowers and butterflies and bees. And so you get out of the car, and instead of shooting the curbsides of streets of New York, you're shooting the curbsides of gravel roads. And not surprisingly, it's you're filling the frame up with not cigarette butts, but butterflies and things like that. So eventually, as I mentioned, when I did the shipyard stuff, which was in effect a massive street photography opportunity, I realized that this is really my calling. And I've been doing that ever since. I still do nature, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't do it with the same passion. And what I mean by that, yes, when I'm shooting nature, I'm very passionate about it. But I mean, I don't go out of my way week in and week out to make sure that all my workshops are about nature. In fact, I have maybe 25% of my workshops might be nature related, and we have a great time. But if you look at my schedule, I'm clearly doing, street photography in India, street photography
Right.
in Singapore, in New York City, Chicago, Boston, Seattle, and so on. And then, of course, some nature stuff would be like Provence, France. I do Holland every April. That's a big sellout every year, which is all tulips, blooming out in the fields. And then in the fall, I find myself going up to Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand. Who knows? It all depends. Every
Right.
year it changes, but nonetheless, it's a mix. It's a mixed bag. So I feel blessed because I know how to do nature. I know how to do city and everything in
Yeah.
between. And then I love, love, love photographing people. And that's another book I did called Understanding Portrait Photography. And if you were to just, go to Amazon and punch in my name, Bryan F. Peterson, Bryan with a Y,
Yeah.
there's all my books.
It'll come up perfect.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
always.
just get
Yeah.
those going. Um, and quick note, as we get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty here, as much as you're willing to share, tell me a little bit about your creative process, right? And as someone who's just starting out, I'm always interested to hear other creative folks and how they get themselves into the flow state of things where things come to them. I'm sure there's a little bit of structure and there's a little bit of, hey, I don't need structure here, but for what that's worth, when you go into a new location, maybe that you've never been before, I know that's tough for you because you've been everywhere almost, but if you're going to go, yeah, go ahead.
I say, I know what you're referring to, but go ahead.
Right. So when you get to a new location, how do you see the art? How do you see the end product? Or is it a work in progress? Take me through some of that.
Well, if you look back, I mean, if you're able to look back when I was before photography, most of my work as a painter centered around three things. I was painting abstract with a lot of emphasis on lines and textures and color. And without realizing it, as my career progressed photographically, I was unconsciously seeking out those kinds of images. And probably quicker than most, I developed and was aware that I had developed a style. People would often say, in my first 10 years, they'd say, "Oh, I recognize that. That's one of Peterson's photos." And I'm thinking, what are they seeing that maybe I'm not recognizing? So I started analyzing my own work and coming up with the realization that my work is best defined by a heavy, heavy awareness of the elements of design. And I've since said in the last probably 3 or 4 years, and I can tell you what I mean by that in just a second, where I tell students, your goal is to shoot the adjective, not the noun.
Right.
So having said that, I'm referring to what in that scene that you're looking at, what in that scene is dominated by lines or textures or form or shape or pattern or color. And they'll start breaking it down, thinking, okay, maybe the key here is that you emphasize just the lines in that photograph. Yes, I know it's a bit abstract, but it's a far more pleasing composition than the noun. In other words, here's the building, here's the front lawn, here's the fountain in front of it, click. It's like, okay, let's break that down. There's a tremendous potential in this overall scene. Something as simple as dropping to your knees on this beautiful morning of heavy dew with a macro lens and shoot the grass and just the vertical lines of the green grasses that are hanging on the dewdrops. Let's consider that as one option instead of the whole scene, grass, fountain, and building. Okay. Option two, how about if we just focus on the texture of the water? We go in really tight, get up next to the fountain using fast, super fast speeds and freeze those drops as they're flying off, coming off the fountain, and see if we can work that into some other photograph. Maybe as they're dropping in the background, we have a person walking through wearing a red dress just to pop a little color in there. It's like, whoa, it's like it's raining on this person. Well, okay. And number three, maybe within those windows of the building, something very obvious, but nonetheless, we go for an abstract reflection. Okay, so take the big picture, be my guest, to prove to people, hey, I've been to this building before. But the fact of the matter is, let's work the building, work the grass, work the fountain for all the other possibilities that lie within. And all of a sudden, you put that presentation together and people go, oh my God, you've just opened my eyes to a world I've never looked at before, because you're actually now going into it with the intention of what lines exist in this photograph that might produce a great photo. And my point being, lines would be including vertical lines of blades of grass that are covered with round circles, in this case, dewdrops. So that kind of thing. So you break it all down, and before you know it, you're no longer getting seduced, if that's the right word to use, by what I call the big picture. Instead, you're saying, no, I'm not going to let you seduce me, because I know inside you, there's a whole lot more if I just would bother to take a look and see what's there. So,
wow. So you dissect an entire image into these little fragments before you decide which way you're going to go with it?
yeah, I mean, quite honestly, composition, in my opinion, is king. I've said this before, and I'll say it to my dying day.
Yes.
A lot of people create this illusion, and I do mean illusion. And I've heard these people speak, and forgive me if I have a tendency to kind of over exaggerate the talk, but this is a classic example, and that's usually with a foreign accent. It's like, oh, light is everything. Without light, you have nothing. Just go for the light. I only shoot in the morning for the first hour and only in the evening for the last 45 minutes. After that, it's rubbish. Just light. And to these people, I say this: you're doing a tremendous disservice, number one, to the photographic community by suggesting such, in my mind, a ridiculous and truly ignorant statement. Because number one, great light rarely salvages a poor composition, but a great composition will always salvage poor light.
Wow.
So my point being is that we don't all get to live in a community or a city or a countryside where we have great lights 365 days a year, number one. Number two, we have great light, but what are we going to shoot? Well, darling, it doesn't matter. Just shoot the light. It's like, that's vague. That helps me no way whatsoever.
Right.
I'll be the first to admit some of my greatest compositions have been a composition, first and foremost, that's powerful, and doubly so, like frosting on a cake, because of the light. The light is, for all intents and purposes, it's strictly frosting.
Yes.
It's not the body, the foundation. That's the cake. Okay.
Wow.
So your composition, yes, is benefited from the light, but man, if you don't have a good composition to start off with, and a subject matter that's going to make me go, wow, that's amazing. Then I can look at it later and go, wow, it's amazing because of this, this, and this, not to mention the light. But I'm not going to stop and look at a composition unless it's, you can see this massive 180-degree rainbow against a dark sky. And oh God, what a shitty city it's in front of. But hey, it's incredible light. So I'll stop and look at that.
Yeah.
But I'm also then going to say, God, it's too bad you couldn't have found that lone tree on the horizon with that same arching rainbow against the dark sky, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But my point is, yes, light is great. It's wonderful, but it's not the be and all to the photograph.
Right. And that kind of goes back to your previous statement where, bloom where you're planted, right? You can't
Absolutely.
always have the best specs. You can't always have the best environment, but you got to make do and make art with what you have, and that phrase, I just wrote that down. That I really, really like that phrase so much. And as we talk about some of the specific, things that you're posting on Instagram and things like that. So I see that you do a lot of photos of different people, right? I saw the one in Jaipur with the older woman, kind of like behind the wall. Some
Yeah.
stuff in Myanmar, and other type things. Now, I'm assuming these people know that you're taking a picture of them. Maybe I'm wrong there, but they all seem to be very candid and natural in the moment. So how do you finesse letting somebody know you're taking a picture of them, but at the same time making it look so natural and vibrant and like they're in their day to day?
It's a good question. And I would say, first of all, we just had this workshop in Chicago, and the students had seen this approach, as you say, take place at one of the fountains. And really and truly, I'm not interested in shooting from the hip. I'm not interested in trying to sneak a photograph of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know who I'm shooting. It can be difficult at times when there's a language barrier. But in those situations, I will take, knowing full well I'm going to have language issues, I'm going to take someone with me who speaks the language.
Okay.
Okay. It's rare when I do that, but if I'm doing that, it's because I'm very intent and serious about this area that I want to make sure and walk away with some good people stuff. So I try to convey to people who are either sitting, walking, standing, whatever the case might be, and say, look, you excuse me, but you have no idea that you're part of this amazing photograph right now.
Yeah.
The background that you're against, the light that you're under. I mean, this is amazing. I don't know if you have time, but I would love it. By the way, my name is Bryan Peterson.
Yeah.
I'm a photographer, and I love your city. I'm just passing through. I mean, do you have believe it or not, it's going to take me a whopping 125th of a second, but we might need 15 or 20 seconds, to kind of set this whole thing up and say, well, what do you want to do? I go, well, all I want you to do is go stand by that stairway. There's some beautiful light coming across there,
Yeah.
and just fold your arms, and if you want, you can put your hand up like so. Take a drag of your cigarette. Just relax. No big deal. And I'll show you what I got, and then you can decide, what you think. And I'll be more than happy to send you a copy. Nowadays, most everybody has an email account, and almost without fail, people say, "Yeah, okay." And then click, and they go, "Oh, wow, that's really cool. Wow, you need more?" And I go, "Yeah, you know what? I'd like that. If you have time, let's go over to this location." And before you know it, and this has happened a lot over the years, where I'm creating, if it's a busy place, people are fascinated, like, what's this guy doing? And then I go click, and then the guy says, "Hey, thanks a lot. It's my pleasure." And then somebody says, "Hey, can you take my picture?" And before you know it, I've had people line up, to take photos. I've been invited to people's homes and say, "Hey, well, come on inside. I want you to meet Auntie and meet my grandma, and maybe you can get a picture of her next to the window." I said, "Oh, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. Yeah, thanks." In other situations where I know I got very specific ideas about a given location, I will take a model with me.
Mm-hmm.
I will take the wardrobe along, and we will stage, quote unquote, stage the photograph. But I also make that point in my books when I say this is a photograph that I use this model or that model that I staged with, and I'm excited to share as well. So as I was saying, the approach to when I approach these people, I'm so not aggressive. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic. I say, "Oh my God, you don't know me, but you just walked through this thing that was amazing. And if I could just, oh boy, I'm sure you're busy. You don't have to go to the dentist right away, do you?" And they're like, "No, what's going on?" And I go, "Well, I'm a photographer, and blah, blah, blah." So this Saturday or Sunday it was in Chicago, we're down at the Navy Pier. There's a wonderful fountain area where all these kids are running around just having a great time. Now that's a real shaky subject. Here you are, this old man with a beard, long hair, got a camera around. He's starting to take pictures of these kids. And any minute you're going to get a parent come and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't be taking pictures of my kid."
Yeah.
That happens, okay? It did not happen in this case, but I could sense one parent's concern, and I realized it was his child because he had went over and grabbed the child and wiped off its mouth for reasons I don't recall why. But nonetheless, I'd been photographing this kid with a dinosaur, little plastic dinosaur, and he's wearing dinosaur shorts. And I'm thinking this kid is totally passionate about dinosaurs, and he's like 3 years old. But the splashing water, I'm telling my students, you guys, everybody ramp up your ISOs, get it up to 1600 because it was somewhat bright overcast. And I said, we need to freeze action here, super fast speeds of at least 1250th of a second. Things are happening so quick. And so I took some shots and I walked up. I said, are you by chance this boy's father? And he said, yeah. And I said, dude, let me send you some copies of this photo. My name's Bryan Peterson. I'm a photographer. I do this for a living. He said, oh, this is great, man. My phone died. I can't believe this is so wonderful news. I said, hey, give me just here's my phone. Give me your email address. And then a mother came up. She said, did I overhear you saying you're photographing the kids? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm here with my class. These are my students. She said, well, I said there's one lady over there. She was photographing my daughter. I said, well, go talk to her. She'll be happy to send you copies. Oh, that would be wonderful too. And before you know it, I think 6 or 7 parents, because there's a group of 8 of us.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, everybody's swapping emails and we're showing them on the back of the camera, the pictures, and they go, oh, that's great. Oh, please send me a copy of that. That would be so good. What kind of camera is that, by the way? How come my iPhone won't do that? Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, you know, you turned what potentially could have been parents who were convinced that there was these pedophiles running around in a photo class enjoying the day. And we're happy to send you copies of the photos. So really what we've done is hopefully create a sense of warmth in terms of the relationship photographers have with the public, because I've met other people who have said, you know, to me, no, screw you, buddy. Last time I did this, a person never sent me the photos, so screw off, go away.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put up with this shit. You guys are all a bunch of selfish people. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm sorry you had that experience. I'm not going to try to convince him to change his mind, or her. I'll just move on to the next subject. So anyway, but the idea of, and there's people who, do I admire them? I wouldn't say admire them. It's just not my style. Who will walk up, shove a camera in your face with a flash or without and go boom. And all of a sudden you're like, you know, that cigarette in your mouth. And you're like, what was that? And that's that surprise look. And they go, whoa, this is art, man. And I'm thinking, I will give you the credit where credit's due, which is, yeah, that's a wonderful fraction of moment gesture.
Yes.
I'm not pleased personally on how it was obtained. And yet I recognize you're not going to get it, chances are, any other way rather than shock and surprise somebody.
Right.
But again, that's not my style, because at the end of the day, I'm going to look at my photographs and say, oh yeah, I remember I photographed this guy named Jimmy. I photographed this woman named Sandra. And I know a little bit about Jimmy, I know a little bit about Sandra. And so here's their emails, not to mention. And so here you go, guys. Thanks again for your time that you gave me this morning or this afternoon. You know, if you want other copies, you know how to reach me. This is my email address and so on. I rarely tell people, this weekend was the exception because I had a group of students. I rarely tell people anything more about me. I just say I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
That's it. When I send them the email with the photographs, at that point, because it's in the bottom of my signature, is 10 of my book covers and my name and my website. And then they'll invariably respond and say, oh my God, not all of them by any means, but usually if there's a response, it'd be like, oh my God, I had no idea that you were a photographer, like photographer.
Right.
And then the question is, are you maybe going to use this in a book? And I'm thinking, okay, they would love to see this in a book. So it's kind of feeds its own little sub business where, yes, in fact, if I could, but I'm going to need a mono release to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. Where do I sign? I say, well, I'll send you a mono release. So it's an indirect way to collect mono releases sometimes. Other times, if this relationship is developing right before my eyes over the course of 15 or 20 minutes, I've got on my phone a program to have them sign on the phone in the mono release.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very good. Very good. And I love it's the more I'm talking to you, the more I'm understanding, and it makes your presence on social media is so genuine and so reflective of you, because every one of your Instagram posts has a story, right? There's a story of the person, you made a connection, and that way when you look back on that photo, you have a good memory associated. Like you said, you didn't just shotgun surprise somebody
Sure.
and they aggressively respond, but you still get the photo, and then it's kind of tainted, right?
Yep.
And you know, one thing that I also see on your post is that you're very keen on teaching.
Yeah.
Every photo shares the lens, you know, the aperture, the specs that you used. And I love that because if someone wants to recreate that photo, they have the exact ingredients to do it. Now, it seems like you have been doing this for many, many years. How important is teaching and giving back in that way? Like how did that factor in? When did that start? And why do you continue to share what you've learned?
Yeah. Well, it started way back in the mid 70s.
Hmm.
And it's a funny story, I suppose, but 1974, I was working in a camera store. And again, still honing my craft, which I started in 1970. And I was selling a few photos here and there back in the day when you could actually make money in the stock photography business.
Okay.
So 1974, I called up the Portland Community College. They had a what they call an adult education program. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a class on photography. Not darkroom. I already know how to do that, but I'm not doing darkroom anymore. Anyway, I'm shooting nothing but color slides. And I've been doing that for the last 4 years almost. I only did black and white for a few months, in fact. And I stumbled on the color by accident and I haven't looked back since. So, do you have a class that will teach me how to use aperture and depth of field and how to take advantage of slow speeds to get blurred motion, how to freeze action, and also the relationship of ISO and how it impacts the choices in shutter speed and aperture? And they went, whoa, no, we don't have any class like that. Why don't you teach it? And I said, no. I believe me, I'm just beginning. I have no idea. And they said, oh, I think you know more than you do. And I said, no, I really don't have a clue. These are questions I would like to get answers to. And they said, no, I think you know more than you do. And the fact
Yeah.
is, I didn't. But they convinced me to do an 8-week class called Creative Color Photography. So I showed up September after this conversation we had in April. I showed up in September to teach a class, and to my utter amazement, 39 people signed up to take this course.
Okay.
I have no idea what I'm doing. So the first week, I brought in 28 slides before and after that I had accumulated already.
Yeah.
And for my own benefit, just to learn the impact of using an orange filter and a magenta filter on different subjects. So I had no filter, no filter. And I did that for my own benefit. So I could determine, okay, the filter does this, no filter does that. So I said to them, I said, you guys, we're here for 8 weeks. I have no idea what we're going to do next week because I've never taught before. So I made a list on the blackboard, understanding depth of field, understanding slow speed motion, understanding freezing action. I said, you guys tell me in what order you want me to teach this stuff. Keep in mind, I had no material. Okay.
Okay.
So at least I would have a week to produce material based on, so I showed them my slideshow, which was before and afters with an orange filter of sunsets and sunrises, before and after with a magenta filter, mostly of cityscapes and city skylines, Seattle and Portland, namely the two skylines. And they were like, whoa, I got to get me that filter and use it for this. And oh my God, how much does that filter cost? And all of a sudden I'm thinking, God, this is working out really well.
Yeah.
So the next week, I did a class on understanding the depth of field preview button and what is depth of field and how to get maximum sharpness or how to get no sharpness. And I did all that because I was working in a camera store and Russ Lamb was the guy's name, who was a working professional in Portland, Oregon. I said, Russ, I've never asked you this before because I respect what you do for a living. And I know you guys don't like to give out secrets, but here, I don't understand the whole depth of field thing. Russ said, okay, I tell you what, I'm going to tell you and nobody else. Okay. Because you work in the store and some people may want to know this, but here's how it works. And I went, wow, this is fantastic. Oh
Yeah.
man, I had a vague idea, but yeah. So that whole week I went out and I shot the same scene, f4 and an f22, same scene, f4, f22, different lenses, same scene, f4, f22. So I had these before and afters. I said, okay, guys, look, it's real simple. Bigger the number, the greater the sharpness. Smaller the number, the no sharpness, and I came up with all these different analogies. And they're like, oh my God, I can't wait for week 3. Well, I can't either, but I could actually use a few weeks because I have no idea what I'm going to do. Anyway, by the end of 8 weeks, this thing was a hit. Now the school's calling me up saying, we got to do this again for the winter term. And the following spring, they got me in an auditorium where there's 211 people coming for the
Wow.
Saturday. It's an all-day Saturday session in Portland.
Okay.
And I said, I'm getting paid $11 an hour. And I got 211 people in the audience.
Right.
I said, oh, something's wrong here. I should do this on my own and charge 75 bucks a piece for a Saturday at the Benson Hotel in downtown Portland.
Nice.
Which is what I did the following September.
Very good.
And I had 156 people come for the first event in the Benson Hotel. And I did a course simply called Creative Color Photography. And I was off to the races. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get my career launched as a commercial shooter.
Yeah.
The more I teach, the more questions are being asked. Questions I don't know the answers to. So my answer to the student is, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you.
Nice.
So I would be forced to learn things like how to use flash, forced to, learn lens choice, point of view, and, these kind of things. What the hell's a fisheye lens? I don't have a clue. You shoot fish with it? And so lo and behold, to answer your question, I'm almost ingrained now, and was from back then, to just teach. It's like I'm helpless. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you guys, I can't wait to share this idea with you that I just photographed. Let me show you how I did it. Because it's something you may want to do.
Yeah.
And the concern, if any, like, why aren't you worried that's going to, worried about what? I don't understand, because I know this from teaching for years and years and years. And we just did it again this weekend. We are all in Chicago shooting the Ferris wheel.
Yes.
And I've given them the assignment. I said, there's a Ferris wheel back there, but notice in front of that is that big swing set. As that swing set rolls around, there is a moment where there's only one or two people that are lit by the sun. The rest are in open shade, super dark. So if we do a sunny 16 exposure here with a high ISO, we will not only get only the person lit by the sun in focus, but with a high ISO, we're also going to be able to get a shutter speed of around a 1500th of a second, or a 1250th, I should say, which will freeze the action, no blurring of the swings, and it could be quite dynamic. Okay, so all of a sudden people are going, oh, okay, cool. Click, 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 click.
Yeah.
Yet every single person approached that with a completely different viewpoint.
Okay.
They all got the exposure correct, but the compositions were as different as night and day.
Yeah.
So my answer to these people who, for whatever reason, are keeping their secrets guarded, you're really not doing anything except contributing to your own paranoia. Because even if you let these secrets out, no one's going to be you.
Right. Exactly.
I have a real problem with it, and the other thing, which we haven't discussed this, but I'll bring it up now. I just want to be on record. There's no question that Photoshop is a necessary evil of digital photography. But when I say necessary evil, I mean, let me start over. It's a necessary tool, but oftentimes it proves to be a unnecessary evil for people, because they're using it when the very thing they're using it for could easily have been accomplished in camera.
Yes, I hear you.
So I'm telling people I'm all for Photoshop. I have a guy, Rick Burris, at my school, who is the preeminent Photoshop Camera Raw Lightroom instructor. He's an amazing individual out of Arizona. He's been with us now for 2 years, and he does, in effect, what we call standing room only classes. I told Rick 2 years ago, nothing's changed. I said, your purpose here is to not encourage my students to replace the camera with Photoshop.
Yes.
Your purpose here is to let them know that Photoshop's primary role is only to expand your vision, not replace your vision.
Very good.
And sure enough, that's what he teaches. So I'm embracing Photoshop. If you look at Instagram feed, you'll see me talking about with zeal. Oh my God, without Photoshop, I could never have done this. You can't do this in camera. What am I talking about? Well, here, blah, blah, blah. And people go, oh my God, yeah, that's great. Okay, I see your video attached to the Instagram post. Oh, I can't wait to try that when I get home. And those kind of things, again, are important. And there's a big reason why, and I want to make this really clear.
Yeah.
The more photographers are educated, the better for the industry. Because I do not want to look at Instagram feeds and look at bad work.
Right.
So ultimately, I'm saying I'm more than happy to be of help to people, because photographically speaking, the caliber of work being produced today is probably the highest it's ever been. But I think also, out of fairness, a lot of that gets produced because of Photoshop. And I wish that wasn't the case, but
Yes.
it is what it is. I'm not going to change people's minds, especially those that are starting out today. Now the rumor mill is that 3 years from now, the iPhone with its incredible, vast, raw capabilities is going to replace the camera altogether. I personally can't even imagine that, because that's the same comment I've heard for the last 10 years. It has replaced the point and shoot.
Right. Right.
Whether or not it replaces mirrorless, I don't know. DSLRs, Nikon has announced they're done. Canon, they've done. I'm done with DSLRs. Everything now is going to go mirrorless. Okay, that's fine. But does that mean photography, mirrorless cameras are going to be replaced by the iPhone or the Samsung? I would be stunned if that was the case. It will make mom and pops better.
Yes.
But is it going to make them into photographers? No. Because if you're truly, truly serious about photography, I don't see how an iPhone is going to replace a wildlife photographer, for example.
I agree. I agree 100%.
I don't see how it's going to replace, the nature photographer who shoots these extreme wide angle close-ups, of the beautiful mule's ears, yellow balsam root flowers against the backdrop of the Columbia Gorge. I don't know. Prove me wrong. That's fine. What I don't like to see, though, the same people that are using the iPhone right away that go into any number of photo software programs, and by the time they're done, it's like, that doesn't even look like the same place.
Right.
Isn't that cool? I just love it. It's great. It makes me
Saturation's too high. Like,
yeah,
oh,
whatever. And you're like, God,
Yeah.
no, it doesn't look cool at all. But
Yep.
that's for another conversation.
Completely agree. And I know we're coming up on time here, so I really want to be cognizant of your time. The last question I would ask, is for anybody who is up and coming, mid-career, advanced, but let's say we go early on, because I think that applies to me. You made a comment about passion, and how folks that will claim they're passionate might not be, right? And what do you have to say about someone or to someone when they do have a passion and they want to explore more of it and keep going? What do you say to them to keep them motivated, keep their endurance going, and things of that sort?
Oh, I got the answer for you.
Please.
I tell my students all the time. I tell them to go down to the local nearest junkyard.
Okay.
That's it.
And that's it.
And just let yourself wander through with the emphasis on line and texture and color.
Okay.
And if nothing else, it will wake you up and it will allow you to continue to practice compositional principles. And by the time you're all said and done at the end of the day of a junkyard, you will not only thank me for that, but you will probably put it on your list of places to go every single time you feel you need some motivation.
Very good.
Pure and simple. And then you'll discover all those wonderful textures that you took. And here's an example where you have a junkyard and you find this car that's being rear-ended. But yet, if you look really close at all that crumpled metal and it's been rusting and peeling paint, you end up getting this incredible drone-looking landscape of the Saudi Arabian desert, minus, the camels and the long shadows, but still it has this aerial view. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is out there.
Yeah.
I gotta keep exploring these kinds of things. And before you know it, that vision translates into street photography. It translates into shipyards. It translates into nature. I was waiting in Glacier National Park for half of the group to show up because they were in another rental van driven by my assistant. And at this location, there was just big blocks of granite that had been broken off by the Forest Service or whoever, the park department, and put alongside the edge of the road to keep people from driving over the edge on the road to what they call Sunrise Pass. And I said to my students, I said, this rock is amazing. It's beautiful. Everybody get your macros out while we're waiting, and we'll photograph nothing but lines and textures that are making up this rock. And they're going, okay. And people were like way back here, and I'm going, what are you doing? I said, you said to photograph the rock. I said, yeah, but you're shooting the noun. You're getting the shoulder of the road and the rock.
Yes.
I said, to do that. I said, no, I didn't. I said, get the lines and the textures. They said, well, I did. And I said, no, you didn't. You got a road and you got a rock. Yes, there's lines and textures, but man, we got to go way, way in there to pick them out. Get your macro out and fill the frame with it. And they're like, well, I can just crop into it when I get home. I said, no, you can't. You can never say I'm going to crop into it in a photo workshop with me. You're going to crop right now in camera and zoom in tighter, focus closer, whatever the case might be. Who has time to crop when you get home? Right. So fill the frame now. And all of a sudden they're going, okay, boom. And they go, whoa, that's amazing. I say, see right there, you said it yourself. You filled the frame up with nothing but texture and lines. And to the naked eye, it's like, What am I looking at here? An aerial of a ocean? Who knows what? And that's
Yep.
the point. So all of a sudden they're thinking, my God, you could always find something to shoot. And the answer to that is because the world is made up of lines, textures, pattern, shape, form, and color.
Yes.
And that's it. So there's never a
Oh, yeah.
shortage of material.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
It's like saying, I can't find anybody to photograph. I said, there's 6 billion people on this planet. You can't find anybody to photograph. So
that is gold, my friend. And I thank you so much again for doing this with me, Bryan. I've learned
my
so
pleasure.
much. I'm very motivated coming off of conversations like these. And I plan on ordering your books. I plan on reading them, doing my reviews on them, sharing your things across multiple platforms. But like lastly, I think the one of the most beneficial high level points you shared was bloom where you're planted. And I really love that. I'm going to take that with me and remember that
Be
maybe
my
every
guest.
single morning, my friend. But
Okay.
again, I thank you. I thank you again. And if you wouldn't mind just staying on for a second, I'll go ahead and just hit stop on the record.